focus. Hey, yo, welcome to the Knowledge Drop. This is Focus of the Flow Mo crew, Bibo and Biga Dojo, Cypher Studio, representing from Finland. We are back with the podcast after a little break, made some more babies, and I'm back after my daddy leaves. So good to be here, and we keep it going with the show. We have an amazing guest today, one of the people who really inspired me all throughout the years of my dancing. And first person I ever saw to make like a recorded tutorial, kind of a VHS tape back in the days, DMC Foundations, together with Mr. Freeze and Fable, and simply one of the illest breakers with character and presence and musicality these days. I saw him rock Korean Rocks event last week or two ago, and when I saw the showcase, I'm like, this is the breaking that I love. The character, the feeling, the presence, all of that stuff. So maybe we can start off with the round from Korea and then get Fever One back over here at the show. Let me get that round.
Let's welcome Fever One! Fever One! Let's go! Gunzblazin!
That is it. And we have the one and only Fever One over here, live from Seattle. What's going on? Thank you for making time. Boom. What up? How you doing, mister?
Thanks so much for having me, yo. This is a super honor to be a part of B-Boy Dojo and the family FOMO. Big shout out, So, yo, man, thanks a lot for having me, brother.
Gunzblazin, right back home from Korea. Tell me about the trip. How did you find the event, Korean culture in general, and how's breaking doing over there?
Yeah, man. So getting to the event, it was Korean Rock, his 20th anniversary. So he throws a jam called Rocking Sensation. And it's a great jam. If you've checked some of the footage, you can check the vibe. It's really, you go there, you feel like you're part of like hip hop actually. The breaking has got a really nice foundational traditional feel, but yet they're like taking moves to the next level. It's the same way you're just kind of supposed to take that blueprint and stay funky with it, dancing a lot. So the vibe was great. Big shout out to Korean Rock. Just want to give him a shout out. Just the sense of he's out there and the work that he puts into promoting all of us as B-boys. And the footage that he comes up with is amazing. A lot of the stuff he put out promoting myself, I never even seen before. I was like, how did you get this footage? It's really crazy. And just the amount of work that he puts into that and the fact that, he tags every B-boy, gives a little date history. It's great to have people like that in the scene, same as we had like the Joe Consos taking photographs back in the day and, Little Shao and, everybody else who's just, giving a part of our history that's live at, your platform as well.
Yeah, I gotta give a big respect to Korean Rock as well. Like, see, his body of work is amazing. Actually, for years, for my anniversary, we've been speaking about the fact that we want to rent out a movie theater, fly him out, and get him to throw the best underground clips on the silver screen for everybody who's out there in the cinema that day. like super underground stuff. Dig deep and have some gems.
That would be
So
amazing. Yeah.
yeah, cool. Okay, nice to hear that the event is dope. I've never been to the event. I've only seen footage. But seems like there's these days there's like different kinds of the events that gather up like cipher heads and the events that gather up people who want to get a medal and everything in between. So it
Yeah,
seems like this one is definitely something that you want to go for if you want to go for something raw and want to catch some style and flavor, right?
yeah, 100%. And that's the beauty of our, part of the culture and dance and breaking is just breaking in general. There's so many avenues, right? Like of course we know we have the Olympics. We also have underground jams where the cipher is. There's multiple ciphers going on, and the actual finals is in a cipher, right? That was like the jam that I just came from in Korea, and they had like their finals. They had everyone, even the judges, would stand in the cipher. So like that energy was there, But again, you have Red Bull events, Monster Energy events, and things on the big stage. So there's a lot of different avenues, and I think that it's all just a part of what we do, depending on what you're really into and what draws you in, right?
A little something for everybody in the scene these days. That's beautiful. It wasn't like that back in the days when you started. Can you take me to the early days of Fever One? Like, what inspired you, and how did you get going with your journey with hip hop?
Man, I mean, it all came from just being when I was younger and in like seventh, eighth grade in Seattle, there was a lot of poppers, and they were called boppers. The style of popping they would do out here was really popular, and there would be a lot of battles. You would go downtown and you'd go hang out where everyone is at, and you would see kids popping against each other. And usually it was kind of the rougher kids, the gangsters, and they were all older. When I first saw it, I was like 11 years old, maybe 10, 11 years old. So I was like really young. And I couldn't pop it all, and it was one of those really intimidating things that if you like got in the cipher, you would probably get chastised or beat up. It was like that back then. It was more of like a street thing, right? You weren't really like everyone's happy just to be doing it. But then in 1982 is when breaking really blew up on a nationwide or even like international vibe, right? Because Rocksteady and New York City Breakers and Dynamic and a lot of those crews from New York were getting a lot of notoriety through media. And there would be television shows like That's Incredible, 2020, 60 Minutes, all these different shows that would be like, hey, look at this thing that's going on in New York. It's called hip hop. And they would show clips. It was like watching clips of Wild Style or Style Wars, these old original documentaries that were done on our culture, right? But what we were experiencing firsthand was graffiti on trains and MCs and DJs and B-boys breaking and the style and fashion, So we checked that being on the West Coast and been like, oh man, what are they doing on the East Coast? That's kind of cool, right? So we started picking up on what they were doing over there because we had like our style, but we also were like, that's cool. There, especially for people like me, who was more like into kung fu and Bruce Lee, and I was like hyperactive, so like having to be able to pop and really like that was hard for me, but when it came to breaking, I looked at it and knew that was something that touched me. It's of what I wanted to do, and me and my friends in the neighborhood all started kind of doing it at the same time. Everyone would have a VHS tape in their recorder at home on hooked up to their TV because breaking was so popular between 1982 and even like all the way up to like 84, 85. You would see it on TV all the time. So all you do is just run over and press pause or record on your VHS and then get that clip, and then you could go and watch it over and over and over again. And that's what we did. I had the New York City Breakers and it was uh, Magnificent Force, I believe. They were dancing for Reagan in his first inauguration with Wiggles and Fable and Cool Keith from Ultramagnetic. He was locking in that, and we recorded that. And so that was some of the things that we were able to watch every day, 100 times a day, and emulate and watch. We're like, what are they doing? Oh, they're like doing this step. We didn't know what top rocking was. We didn't know the name of it. We just knew that they did a step up top and then did a drop onto the floor and started going off. So we would just try to emulate that and do whatever we could, and that's how it all kind of started for me.
That's wild. Can you
Yeah.
tell me how was the welcome from the breakers from New York for Seattle head? We hear a lot of stories about New York versus Cali, like East
Mhm.
Coast, West Coast, but not too many stories from the Seattle side.
Yeah, man. So Seattle has a really rich history. I mean, like I said, all the way back. I mean, when I was growing up in the '70s, there's like a lot of rock groups out here, like Heart. There was, Jimi Hendrix is from out here. Quincy Jones is from out here. So like you were always growing up, like being aware of like music and live music, right? So Seattle has like a really deep history in music and art, all the way up through the '90s and grunge. And you've heard about, Nirvana and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam. They're all from up here. So, like, growing up out here, you're kind of like into music, you're into the arts. And we all started breaking, and we had connections. There's people that there's a army base out here, Fort Lewis, and so there's a lot of kids that grew up in Tacoma area that were from other states, from New York even, who would come with like tapes of old like New York radio shows, Red Alert, things like that. Or just had people that had family back east, and they would come back with fashion and tapes and stuff like that. So we were always up on this like kind of New York style and giving props to the originators and where it came from. And then later on, when like a lot of these groups were going on tour, like Rocksteady came out here to Seattle and doing a Beat Street kind of promo tour, and they performed at a local community college. And I think that was like 1984, 84, 85. I can't remember the years, like a little fuzzy. But anyway, they came out. So they were the first to kind of come out. Frosty came out with, I believe it was Jazzy J. They came out and did a thing with Bambaataa, previously to that. So Frosty was out here. And then also the New York City Breakers came out later on in 1986, I believe, to battle a crew from Tacoma. They did a big battle, the New York City Breakers against High Performance. And when the New York City Breakers came out here, uh, Icy Ice was one of the members, Mr. Wave and a few other. And we met them first, Icy Ice and Wave. And then when they came to battle, Alien Ness was battling with them. He was traveling with that crew in New York City Breakers and doing shows. And so when they did the battle out here, Alien Ness was a part of that crew. And what happened was when they came out here, they loved Seattle so much, and like just the vibe. And Icy Ice Corey, he wanted to finish his school. He was still in high school at the time, so he wanted to finish up. So he decided to stay here in Seattle and finish high school while they were doing all these tours and shows and stuff. And I believe Alien Ness during the same time, he stayed as well, but he stayed in this city right outside of Seattle called Tacoma. And Tacoma's maybe like a 40-minute drive. It's not far, but it's like a totally different city, you know what I mean? So he was out there, Icy Ice was out here, and I was able to kind of build a really strong bond between Icy Ice and myself. I had already been breaking for like 4 or 5 years, but when he came out, it was my first opportunity to get down with like a b-boy from New York that you would see on TV, someone who was creating moves like halos and ninjas. Um, these moves were so dynamic, and the way he was able to throw his body, was really groundbreaking at the time, I should say, and yeah, I was able to train with him, and that was like my first actual connection with like a New York b-boy. It was like in the mid '80s, and that's how I met Fable, because him and Fable would keep in contact, and I met Fable through Icy Ice, and I met Alien Ness later on because one of my best friends moved out to where he was at, and So it's crazy. We just kind of had like this, bond between New York. There's a lot of producers out here as well, and record diggers, record diggers that find really rare gems and sell them to producers like Pete Rock and Premiere, and a big shout out. I'll just shout out Supreme. That's my guy. He's in my first breaking crew, but he's like one of the diggers I'm referring to. That he's just
Hey,
he's a master in his craft. And Jake One, he's a really big producer out here right now. At the time, he does a lot of stuff. You know that song "Rock Cocaine Flow" from De La, got that crazy like beat. So yeah, he produced that, and
dope.
Philly Freeway and those guys. So yeah, we still got like a
Nice.
lot of stuff in the underground music scene out here. Hip hop's really has always been a thing, with whether it's graph, whether it's music or dancing. Seattle's always been kind of like a hub for it. I guess.
Love it. Yeah. So the connection with Alien Ness, Rusty Shank, and Guns Blazing goes all the way to the 80s, actually.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Actually,
you
that's
guys
when
was
we
making a
first
lot
met.
of noise in two and twos, like a deadly duo as well. Can you take a little bit further on that? Like, how did that chemistry start to work out? And we
Yeah,
already
man.
knew he came to the West, but how did it go from there to actually killing battles with the two of you?
Yeah, I'll try to. I get a little long-winded. I'll try to make it kind of short and sweet. But basically, since we had history, ended up moving out to New York in '97, and that was the year that me, Zulu Gremlin, and we moved into an apartment in the Bronx with Speedy D in London from the New York City Breakers. Uh, we weren't doing shows with the New York City Breakers. We created our own thing called the Breakbeat Assassins, and Zulu Gremlin was doing production, and him and I were doing a choreography for shows to do like short 4-man routines and solos. And we created a bunch of stuff, started moving around, working with those guys, and um, through being at that apartment in the Bronx, that's where I started meeting all these. Like Gremlin had a lot of connections with guys because he was down with Rocksteady, and he lived out in New York before, so he just started calling people like Frosty and Little Ep, and all these people would start coming to the house, and that's how I started meeting these guys back then. And so Alien Ness, he was actually down with New York City Breakers at the time, and New York City Breakers were starting to do the kind of resurgence, with London and Speedy, and Bam Bam was popping, and so they were starting up, and Ness started doing stuff with them because he was like one of the original guys from the '80s. Not original, but he got down in the '80s, before it kind of died out. So we kind of like were crossing paths a lot, and then him and I just ended up kind of stepping off onto our own and doing stuff with Fable. Actually, big shout out to Fable. If it wasn't for Fable, I wouldn't be able to do the things that I was doing in New York, all the way to the Foundations video. But he was super instrumental in keeping me with work. When I first was interested in coming out to New York, when I saw those guys on MTV in like the early '90s, with that show, The Grind, that famous one. I hit up Fable. I said, "Yo, I see you guys are still dancing. I want to come out and figure out how I can make a living." Because I kind of knew that from breaking in the '80s, and we were sponsored by Swatch and Adidas and doing shows back then. I knew that I could do this, and get paid for it. Maybe not so much make a living, but get paid for it. And it was kind of like what I was excelling at in the late '80s. Even I never really stopped dancing, even when it got played out. People, oh, that's whack. I was still doing it. And so back to just being able to kind of keep it going. I guess that's yeah.
Dope, dope.
So me and Alien Ness, I kind of got sidetracked, but Alien Ness and I started doing shows with Fable, and then we were doing a lot of routines, and we had a really good chemistry together. And so a lot of the Rocksteady guys like Wiggles, Fable, Frosty, started to like getting in the legs ear and being like, "Hey, these guys are nasty. We should get them down with Rocksteady. They definitely have that style." We had meetings, we sat down, and then we had this battle that Alien S and I entered. It was a battle in the Bronx that Legs put on. It was a 2-on-2, and so it was like perfect for us. And we're like, okay, we're gonna enter this battle, and show everybody kind of like what we've been building on, with all these shows that we've been doing, all these routines, the chemistry that we have, the commandos. We were really like bringing that to the forefront. At the time, wasn't anyone else that had like a duo that were doing commandos and routines and things of that nature the way we were doing them, and had the same chemistry. So we came into that battle, and when we got there, we noticed that Floor Rock and Heps Fury were there. There were two b-boys from Rocksteady from two different cities. So, we and Ness looked at each other. We're like, we know what's going down today. We're going to battle Rocksteady to get in Rocksteady. So, we had planned out our whole, battle. We ran through about 5 crews. And then after that, Legs popped it on us. Like, hey, guess what? You guys are going to battle to get in Rocksteady, or, battle Rocksteady. Now it's like DVS versus Rocksteady, because DVS is a crew that I created with a few other people here in Seattle. It's a graph crew, b-boy crew, DJs, all that. So, we were repping that, and the whole Rusty Shank and Gunzblazin, those were our aliases. Gunzblazin was just describing my style. I had a lot of these hand techs that I'd pull out guns that I learned from Little Lep. We can get into that, but Ness, he was thinking of aliases. I had the Gunzblazin, so he was like the Rusty Shank. It's kind of hand in hand. And then when we entered the battle, we didn't tell anyone we were going to enter this battle. We did it on the low. So we had someone else sign up for us, and they signed us up under bullet holes and stitches. So our aliases had aliases. So when they ended up announcing us, they were like, "Oh, the next battle, bullet holes and stitches," and everyone was like, "Who's that?" And then me and Ness walked in, and we took off our jackets, and it said Gunzblazin and Rusty Shank, and it was like, "Ooh." So like, we even had like just our mentality of the way we wanted to present ourselves and come in, and it's all part of the strategy.
So dope, yeah. And it's funny how life goes sometimes. You end up doing shows and you realize like suddenly you have mad routines and commandos that you can use in battles
Yeah,
that you never
exactly.
thought about before. That's cool. And it's funny that you mentioned that you learned some of your style as far as hand styles and gestures and burns from Little Lep.
Exactly.
When I remember speaking to Alien Ness at one point, and he was saying like the best that he has ever seen in his life was seeing Little Lep, a little tips in a club, just doing burns, nothing else, just simply just hand styles and burns in a
Yeah,
corner by himself. He was like that was like the essence right there. Can you explain a little bit about how you worked
100%.
your way with your style and what did
100.
Lil Lep had to do with it? Did it
Yeah,
have some influence from rocking outside of Lil Lep as well? Because they use a lot of burns in rocking and
yeah,
such. Walk us through.
I'll walk you through, man, 100%. So, like, the whole Guns Blazing persona came from me entering this battle in the Bronx. I was training with Ken Swift at the time. We were training a lot together. He would come up to my place. I'd go down and train with him. And after we were training one day, I told him I was going to enter this battle. I said, "Yo, you have any like tips, on like what I should do, And he said, "Man, just go all out, guns blazing." And, guns blazing is just a term that people use for just going all out. And so when he said that, I was already messing around with a lot of the hand techs and the weapons and things like that, because Little Ep and I, when we first met, it was an automatic connection. He came over to the house that we were living at in the Bronx. He rode up on his BMX bike, and that was the first part that's got me. Is like this little guy that I always looked up to on the videos. Like for me growing up, I was always really small, and I still am, but I was the smallest. So seeing Little Lep and being like one of the smallest, but he was actually the oldest. He had the cleanest footwork, the crispy drills, and just the way he just moved. He was a persona of a b-boy in my mind. Like, he would get on the floor, do back rocks, tap right into a snappy chair, kick his leg, spin up, go back down, hit a drill, come back up. Like, he was just like bing, bop, boom, boom, super clean and crisp every time. So when he came over, it was like crazy just to meet him. He was riding BMX. I used to ride BMX, and he the Mexican came on. We were just playing music, listening to breaks. the Mexican came on, and I looked over, and he was just going off, like just in his own zone. Wasn't like, yo, check this out, look at me. He was just feeling like his favorite song, and he just was grooving. And I looked at him, my jaw was on the floor, and I was like, man, I told myself, that's the essence. That's how I want to dance.
Wow.
That for me is like just his spirit moved me, you know what I mean? And to me in dance, that's what it really is about. It's about your spirit and how you can transcend that onto other people, right? So I saw that, and just automatically we clicked. We were just two little guys hanging out. I lived with him for like 4 years. We, and I speak of him in the past because, he passed away last year. So God bless, and, big up Little Lep. But Little Lep and we were like this. Everywhere I went, he went, vice versa. And we trained together. And so we would end up hanging out, dancing all night long, and he would explain to me, the style that he had when it came to rocking, because, rocking was really popular, and, the Brooklyn style of rock was really big, with King Up Rock coming out. And, Lep, he wasn't from Brooklyn, he's from the Bronx, so he had his own style of rock and the way that they would get their influences from. And so a lot of his influences came from salsa and the Latin hustle and these type of dances. And he learned firsthand from like the gangsters back in the day when he would like go out to clubs. He would see like the crazy gangsters in the trench coats with the guns, and they would like pull out the gun and hand it to him, be like, yo, hold this, little man. And they would go out and dance with the female and do all these really nice crispy steps and spin around. And sometimes they would like mimic like they'd have a gun and then put it back, and he would tell me, the way they would do it, they would really illustrate and paint a picture of how you pull it out, cock it, put it back, put it back in the holster. And while you're doing that, you're still rocking, and you're still hitting these like different steps. And so he would always incorporate those type of burns and the shotguns and things like that in the way he would dance and rock. But rock was so much really like top rocking, because when he would top rock, it was really just like get down to business, hit that beat, funky, boom, boom, bap, and then he's into footwork and continuing that flow. But when it came to rocking, he was an amazing dancer. He could do salsa, he could do, the Latin hustle, all of those different dances. But that's where I really started gaining the like knowledge of how to pull out these guns and weapons and stuff. And for me, like I always liked rock. I still do rock, and I got rock steps. But then also, like for me in breaking, it was always about burning. It was always about taking out your opponent. It was always about making them feel stupid, or doing what you could do to smoke them, burn them. And that was more of my persona. The way I like to break was like really hard and fast, and stick and move. Um, so that was kind of like the whole Gunzblazin persona. And when I got the guns, and it was funny, Little Lep, he would tell me, he's like, yo, don't show nobody this, because this is our style. If you show them this, everyone's gonna bite it. Like that was his mentality. It wasn't so much like the gatekeeping, but it was like, this is our shit. And we would do routines. I got like old videotapes of us getting down. We have a routine called Pass the Gun, and we would just rock, and then he would pull it out and pass it, and I would do that, and I'd pull something else out, pass it back to him. And so like really that whole style. And when you see people rocking and you see people pulling out the guns and the shotguns and all that stuff, just believe that like that's where it came from. It came from Lep. And I was just lucky enough to be able to be a vehicle to kind of show b-boys and kind of bring that to the game. And that's where like the whole Gunzblazin persona comes from. It's like Little Lep,
Hey.
all my the people that I looked up to over the years, it's really for them.
Super, yeah. And I never saw that side of Lep. The footage that I saw from Lep was always top rock, straight to footwork, shuffle, shuffle, drill up. That's it. So he really lived up to his words. He's like, don't show this to nobody. Keep you on
Yeah.
the ground.
And we Jeromsky and I, we did it's a documentary / tutorial. It's called Way of the B-Boy, and you can catch some clips of it on YouTube. but there is a clip of Little Lep on Brooklyn Bridge rocking, and he's doing this particular style where he's pulling out the weapons and he's doing kind of like this Latin hustle style step, 1 2 1 2 1 2. And so you can get a little, view of that when you get the chance, because that's kind of like, you'll see, you're like, oh man, he's nasty.
Dope, dope. All right. Now, next up, take us to the DMC Foundations, building up one of the
Yeah,
earliest real tutorials as far as VHS time. How
yeah,
did that
man.
happen?
Yeah, so that was a crazy one. So again, big up to Fable for being in the position to connect that, put that together. He wrote a lot of the script as far as I know, but the way it went down was really crazy. He had an opportunity. He was working with DMC, the Turntable Battle company, and he was working with them, and they were interested in doing a tutorial. And in the past there's been tutorials that have been made, but they were like almost really cheesy, like this is how you moonwalk and you lay on your back and do a backspin and freeze. They do like that part where you're just like, oh, what is this? And so he had an idea is to get 3 generations of b-boys together and do a real tutorial on what breaking is, for the masses. And yeah, like you said, it was the VHS era, and his 3 people that he had from each era. First generation was Track 2. The second generation was Mr. Freeze, and the third generation would be myself. And he got us all together, and it was crazy because they're just like, okay, we're gonna go shoot this video in one day, like no script, no idea really what we're gonna do. We're just gonna, go to this park, shoot some, shots in the park. It was actually at the Graffiti Hall of Fame. We shot a little bit there, and then after that, we went to the studio. And then when we got to the studio, Track 2 sits down in this chair and he pulls out this notebook. He's like, oh, I wrote down like a bunch of moves, so I'll just like tell you the move and you do it. So I was like, cool. I was like, that's dope, because it was almost like for me a test. It was like I have like one of the original 4 founders from the first generation of b-boying who's actually testing me on like my knowledge or my ability to do these moves. And that was like the main reason why I really wanted to go back to New York, is to get back to the Mecca, find out where this dance is from, why people do it the way they do it, and the people who do it, for them to be able to see me and find out whether my style or what I do is even acceptable to them as the 4 founders. That's the way I looked at it. I was like, I could go to New York and they could be like, yo, you're whack, get out of here, that was corny, you know what I mean? Or I could go there and I could, get the respect and be like, yo, that was dope. And so, that was my experience when I went to New York. I really went there to kind of prove that I knew my foundation and I knew those things. And when I did the foundation video, it was like a perfect test. We just ran
Yeah,
down.
crazy.
Yeah, that's how it
Went
went.
down in history, and I think it's 2 decades since I saw that tape, and I just looked it up. The whole thing is on YouTube as well, so need to
Yeah,
go back to it, refresh the memory. I didn't even remember that Track 2 was there as well, so need to
yeah.
watch the whole thing again.
It's so
Get that
crazy
character
because
from the
I
time.
traveled all over and I've had so many people come up to me and be like, yo, you taught me how to like do windmills, or you taught me turtles. And, it's through that foundation video. I've never met these people on the other side of the world, but they were able to like access that and know who I was through that actual video. So that's,
Yeah, that's huge, man. Cool. 2025, the year after the Olympics. Where do you see breaking going from here on? How do you feel of the current scene? What's happening right now, and where do you see we are going in the next couple of years?
well, from my last trip, even the Olympics, like I said, we have all these different avenues, right? Some people want to do sponsored big stage jams. Some people want to do the Olympics, especially for a younger generation. Maybe that's something that, they're looking forward to. Like, I can be an Olympics, Olympian. Um, Same thing with the underground jams. You go there, they're not going nowhere. We have b-boys that have been breaking 20 plus years, right? That are super nasty. And when you look at breaking, it's still breaking, right? It hasn't morphed into something that's really weird that you don't recognize. There are different styles and people that do things that maybe like considered outside of the box, or maybe rhythmically they're not traditionally the way that they've been done before. But it's all way part of growing. But then at the end of the day, you go places like Korea, Poland, Russia, Japan, China, and the younger generation is crazy. Breaking isn't going anywhere. The style is just getting better. The kids are getting younger. When I was out at Rocking Sensation, there was two b-boys from China. Actually, there's like four of them, but two of them you probably seen on the footage from the jam because they threw them on there. Um, Lewis. Lewis is one of the b-boys' name. I have the worst memory, but I have it written down. But yeah, a couple of these b-boys are incredible. Who is it? Louis Shan, I think his name. Louis Shan was one of them, and the other kid's name is Don. These two kids from China, and I believe they're like 9, 10 years old. And the way they move, bro, dancing is
Oh
on.
my.
They're grooving, they're doing this, they're looking at you like what, and like that's just the energy they're bringing. And when it comes to the power moves, they're, I don't know, like maybe 60 pounds wet or something. They're just light and they're just ping, 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 ping. Power moves are super fast. So it's one of those
Okay.
things where like the future's bright. I just want to shout out like some of the young up and coming b boys that I've been checking over the years. I like wrote down a couple. I got Nord Diamond from Russia. He's like really nasty. Bumblebee, of course, a lot of those guys. Japan, there's this kid, Ryan. Ryan, he's super nasty. He was out there at the jam. Little Man from Poland. Big shout out, Little Man from Poland. These are all like younger guys who are like in their teens, maybe 17 years old or 10, 9, 11. But there's this group of kids right now that are coming out that are powerhouses and they can dance. And so that's the one thing that I've noticed from traveling. I was out in Japan last year, um, and another incredible scene where you're seeing young kids walk into the jam, and all the kids that are like teenagers and younger are all in the jam just grooving and listening to music, and they're not even in the cipher, they're just grooving and listening to the music. And then when they get in the cipher, they already got that, they already got that flavor and they already got that movement. So that's like one of the things that is really hard to teach and it's really hard to come by. And I see that now, whoever's teaching and the kids are starting to realize that's what the older guys are doing now, right? It's not so much about the movement, it's not so much about the crazy balance trick, it's not so much about how I could fly through the air. It's how can I do those things and still be really funky and make people just get that like, that's just nasty, right? Um, so for me, like that's what I see in the future. That's what I see breaking going to is taking what we do and just continuing it and keeping it in the sense of b-boying and b-girling and breaking and rocking and dancing to the music that we dance to. There's tons of breaks, right, that we don't know. There's tons of breaks that we do know that we love to dance to, whether we've heard it a million times or not. It still hits the soul because that's part of our culture. That's part of our dance. That's part of our DNA, right? So, again, produced beats, you know, really move you and you have the instruments, but there's nothing like a live band. There's nothing like the layers of the music where you could tap in to all these different rhythms and instruments and sounds and vibes, and so I think that's where breaking is going. It's like, okay, we know we could do incredible things. There's 6-year-olds that can do one-handed air flares all day long with their eyes closed, right? that's super dope. Now they're doing it with flavor. Now they're doing it dancing and being funky with it. I think that's where I see the future. You know.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. Kids are taking back what kids once created. It's going full circle, and
Yeah,
we gotta
man.
love the process in that way.
Yeah. No, it's cool. It was funny. Those two kids from China, Don and Louis. I believe that's how he says his name. They were battling the adults, like the older guys. So they were like straight up and giving them problems. It's like I think they might have lost a round because like they kind of had some small minor crashes because they have these crazy power move combos that they do. It's insane. You actually have to like slow it down to be like, wait a minute, what was he just doing right there? Like doing like airflow while kicking his legs like this. It was just like nuts. We're just like, what's going on? But yeah, again, these guys are just like they're battling grown people, and then they enter the kids battle, and they crush it in that. So it's crazy, man. It's dope to see these little guys doing their thing.
Yay.
The
Cool.
girls are killing it more than ever. Yeah, same thing across the board with the girls as well.
Have to agree on that. And but on the other side, we need elders in the scene with experience. So don't ever stop. And so dope to always see you in jams and events wherever I travel to.
Yeah,
And I'm
man.
happy to see you in great shape and still getting busy. So keep inspiring, Fever. Thank you for your time.
Yo, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, man. And thanks for listening to me being long-winded and everything. I appreciate it, man.
Everybody follow him on Instagram at Fever1. And you said that you have a nonprofit as well that you are working with right now,
Yeah,
right?
we do a nonprofit called Headspin. We do an all styles battle once a month at this bar, but then we just decided to open it up to the community, so we'll be able to have opportunities for dancers to come in and have open sessions, and also have a space to do choreography and build shows, and then showcases where also have people to do showcases in theaters and things like that. But this is all free to the community. We're just creating a space for that. So it's called Headspin. Look it up, Headspin 206 on Instagram, Fever One, Fever ONE on Instagram. So yeah, look me up, hit me up
Has
anytime.
been
I do
206.
coaching workshops. I'm out there. So yeah, man.
Dope. Let's make it happen. Thank you for your time, and we stay in touch, Mister. Keep inspiring.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
On to the next one. Peace, peace. Guns blazing. Oh, thank you, Fever One. I'm inspired. About to go back to practice, and I need to rewatch the DMC Foundations. And you should do so. Look it up on YouTube, and after you're done, head out to bboydojo.com, get my free footwork workshop, and we build. Thank you for tuning in. On to the next one. Peace, peace.